She could have killed every one of them. 50 tons, a single flick of her tail, and it's over. Instead, she held still. To every survival system in her body, those divers looked like predators, the most dangerous animal her species had ever encountered, and she let them put their hands on her. For over an hour, a humpback whale, tangled in 20 crab trap lines off the coast of San Francisco, let a team of strangers cut ropes off her body. She didn't thrash, she didn't dive. At several points, she repositioned herself, rotating, extending a fin to give them better access. When the last rope was cut, she didn't leave. She swam back to each diver, one by one. Scientists call what she was doing threat suspension. They are careful not to call it anything more than that. But the behavior after the ropes came off, that part doesn't have a clean, scientific name yet. Here is what being trapped does to a wild animal's body. The moment it loses the ability to move, cortisol floods the bloodstream. Adrenaline spikes to levels the body was never meant to sustain for long, and heart rate doubles, then doubles again. Researchers measured cortisol in wild deer caught in fencing and compared it to that of deer injured by gunshot. The deer caught in the fencing had higher cortisol, higher than being shot. Their bodies were treating entrapment as the worst possible thing, because in their species' history, it usually was. From the outside, pupils fully dilated, muscles locked, breathing shallow and fast. Wildlife rehabilitators describe it as the animal going somewhere else, still present but attending only to the immediate threat. You've seen that look, not in an animal, in a person, someone who has stopped being present in the room. So when a human walks toward a trapped animal, it doesn't read rescuer. It reads the arrival of a predator at the worst possible moment, which makes what that whale did even harder to explain. Because she wasn't exhausted into stillness. She wasn't too weak to fight. She made a choice, or something that looked exactly like one. And it turns out the whale was the easiest one to explain. James Moskito had been diving for years. He knew what a distressed animal looked like in water. This was different. It was December 2005. A female humpback, 18 miles off the Farallon Islands, tangled so badly she could barely keep her blowhole above the surface. 12 crab traps, 90 pounds each, pulling her down. More than 20 lines wrapped around her mouth, her fins, her tail. Some had cut into her skin. Moskito and 3 other divers went in carrying curved knives. A whale in that condition, exhausted, in pain, should have been the most dangerous animal in the water. She stopped moving the moment they entered. For over an hour, she held position at the surface while they worked. At several points, she rotated her body, extended a fin in ways that gave the divers better access to the lines they were cutting. Think about what that means physiologically. Her cortisol was still elevated. Her stress response hadn't switched off. She was still afraid, and she held still anyway. That gap between fear and stillness is not something biology predicts. When the last rope came free, Moskito expected her to dive, to disappear. That's what the threat response says to do the moment the constraint is gone. Instead, she swam in slow circles around the divers. Then she surfaced beside each one individually and nudged them, one by one, with the tip of her jaw. Moskito told the San Francisco Chronicle it felt like gratitude. Scientists are careful with that word, but they don't have a better one for what she did next. Humpback whales have spindle neurons, the same specialized cells found in humans and great apes, linked to empathy and social processing. Scientists assumed these cells existed only in primates. The whale had them before we knew to look. So what actually happened in that water? There are 2 explanations. Scientists favor one. The other is harder to dismiss than it should be. The first is tonic immobility. When an animal loses all options, the nervous system shuts movement down from a layer older than flight or fight. The animal freezes. From the outside, it looks easy to mistake for calm, for cooperation. It looks exactly like trust. The second explanation is threat assessment. Every wild animal is running a calculation on everything around it. The question the brain always asks is not, is this dangerous? It's, does this match the pattern of something dangerous? A predator moves fast, direct line, focused. A human trying to help moves differently. Slowly, no sudden gestures, touching the rope, not the animal. The brain searches its entire library, comes back empty. The crisis response stalls. Here's the problem with using tonic immobility to explain the whale. Tonic immobility is passive, but she repositioned her body. She extended her fin. She adjusted her angle to give the divers better access. That is not what tonic immobility is supposed to look like, which means something else was running, something that looked less like a shutdown and more like a decision. If this were one animal, one encounter, you could explain it away. But the pattern shows up across species, in animals with almost nothing in common, except a history with a specific human. Crows offer a smaller but telling version. In Seattle, Gabby Mann began feeding crows as a child. Months later, they started leaving objects where she fed them. Glass, buttons, small fragments with no food value. Research at the University of Washington has shown that crows recognize individual human faces and remember them for years. Whatever the exchange meant, it did not fit neatly into a food-for-food model. The objects are still in a box in her house. Then there is the widely reported story of Lawrence Anthony. In 1999, he took in traumatized elephants at his Thula Thula Reserve in South Africa. After his death in 2012, accounts from his family said 2 elephant herds moved toward his home and stood near the compound for 2 days. At minimum, it points toward something researchers already know. Elephants carry long social memories, and their behavior around familiar humans can last far beyond the first encounter. You've probably never cut a whale free from fishing lines, but you've been in a room where someone was deciding whether to trust you, and you felt it. That stillness, that moment before they let their guard down, the way the air changes when a person stops running their threat assessment on you and just stays. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The animals can only show us what they did, and what they did again and again was stay close to the thing that helped them. Not because the biology required it, because their behavior no longer looked like a simple escape. The whale didn't hold still because James Moskito had good intentions. Intentions are invisible. She held still because of the way he moved. His body was telling a story, and the story it told was not predator. Which means to be trusted by a wild animal, you don't have to feel the right things. You have to become the right thing, slowly enough and long enough that the calculation changes on its own. That's rarer than it sounds, even between people. Every case so far involves an animal that had no choice about the initial encounter. The whale was tangled. The elephants were traumatized. The crows found a child who had dropped food. This one is different. On the night of January 11, 2013, a group of divers were doing a manta ray night dive off the Kona coast of Hawaii. Dark water, underwater lights, routine dive. They weren't looking for anything unusual. Then something came out of the dark and swam directly toward diver Keller Laros, a bottlenose dolphin. Moving with purpose, it circled him once, close enough to touch, then stopped and held position in front of him. Just waited. Laros reached out. That's when he felt it. A fishing line wrapped around the dolphin's left pectoral fin and a hook embedded near its eye. The line had been there long enough to cut into the skin. The dolphin didn't pull away when he touched the wound. It held still. Laros signaled for scissors. The dolphin waited. For 8 minutes, it remained motionless while Laros worked the hook free and cut the line. At one point, the dolphin surfaced to breathe, then came back down and repositioned itself in front of him. It came back. This dolphin wasn't trapped. It was a wild animal in open water, where it has every advantage, and it chose to approach a human, hold still while that human caused it pain, surface to breathe, and return to finish what it started. Tonic immobility doesn't explain that. You can't freeze your way back to someone. Actively seeking out a human, in open water, at night, that looks less like a stalled system, and more like a system that had reached some kind of conclusion. What conclusion exactly? That's where the science gets quiet. Dolphins have mirror self-recognition. They use individual acoustic signatures to identify each other, distinct enough that researchers treat them as names. the cognitive equipment to distinguish a human who represents danger from one who might not. A dolphin is not missing that. Whether Keller Larose's dolphin used it that night is something the data can't settle. But it found him in the dark, and it came back after it breathed. James Moskito has been asked about that afternoon many times. What he keeps coming back to is the moment after the last rope came free, when he expected her to dive, and she didn't. He was a predator. She knew that. And when she was finally free, when there was nothing stopping her, she turned toward them instead. Moskito said it felt like gratitude. He knows that's not a scientific statement. He said it anyway. What science cannot reach is the inside of those encounters. What it was like to be that dolphin, coming back down after a breath. What the elephants were moving toward on that 12-hour walk. Or whether we find meaning in these moments because we are also animals. And the pattern we keep finding, in the stillness of a whale, and the walk of a herd, and the gift of a crow, is something that looks like ourselves. He had to become a certain kind of person before any of it was possible. He had to slow down, hold steady, let his body tell a story that didn't match the predator. That part, the part that was asked of him, not her, is the part worth sitting with.